with the most local news. This is News 4 at 6:30.
Right now in News 4 at 6:30, a trial run to test body cameras with the Erie County Sheriff's Office is over. How the pilot program was received by the department.
And still keeping a close eye on the snow across all of New York. We're certainly getting in on the easier side of this hole, but talk about the latest snow totals through the finish of the week coming up.
And closing the loophole, what a local assemblyman wants to see happen is the Assembly and Senate battle between two gun law packages. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight at 6:30. I'm Dave Graber.
And I'm Christy Kern. We saw a little bit of snow so far today, and we will see more this week, but not nearly as much as other parts of the Northeast. Another nor'easter is hitting the coast for the second time in less than a week. You are looking at live pictures of the conditions in New York City right now. You can tell it looks pretty wet there. Governor Andrew Cuomo is deploying 400 National Guard members to the area of New York City, Hudson Valley, and Long Island. Because of the storm, tractor trailers are banned from the 90 from the Syracuse area to New York City. This includes buses, box trucks, and other high-profile vehicles. The governor did not say when the ban will be lifted.
Meanwhile, whiteout conditions are creating dangerous travel in Pennsylvania and Massachusetts. Now, parts of those states could see up to 18 inches of snow. Officials worry if the snow is heavier and wetter than the last storm, kind of like what we saw last week, it could snap even more trees and more power lines that are already weakened from some of those earlier storms. So, how much snow will we see here in western New York now that we've checked in with the other part of the state? Chief Meteorologist Todd Santos has all of that and more in your forecast first at 6:30. Good evening, Todd.
Good evening. A tiny fraction of the numbers you were just mentioning. So yeah, once you go well east of Syracuse is where it gets messier, and especially into the thruway into Massachusetts. I know we don't talk a lot about that piece, but if you're driving in that direction, that's where some of the biggest totals are likely to be found, along with the biggest wind gusts. You see the whole setup here, though, and how this is all kind of interrelated. Heavier snow to our east with temperatures for a lot of those areas above freezing, so we know what that does, the heavy wet snow. And for us, we will get a little bit of lake enhancement. It's not going to anywhere match what's going on along the East Coast. So at this point, we're finding 34 at the airport. Breeze out of the south and southwest, 14 miles per hour right now into the airport. That wind direction will likely hold overnight tonight into tomorrow. So that's how we'll get this minor lake enhancement. We still have basically at best 20% ice coverage on Lake Erie. There's a lot of open water there. We're just not going to truly tap into the potential of the lake at this point with this setup, but we'll get a little bit. There's a look at the radar, at least kind of more focused on us. We have had a few good bursts of snow, places like Jamestown. I got a report out of there. They're just not going to be an all-night type snow. I mean, you get a good burst, it sticks, and then it moves on, and we get a big break in the snow. And that's what allows kind of the lesser end of totals. And I'll show you at least totals for tonight, but there's an easier way to generalize it. A lot of areas down in the hills, maybe find around an inch tonight with an additional around an inch tomorrow. Points north, up near Buffalo and our northern counties, look more on track for, say, dusting to half-inch numbers tonight. And when you factor in tomorrow, so this goes tonight and tomorrow combined to get these type of numbers. None of them are all that big, but you get the idea. It's enough to make for some slick roads. I think a lot of areas to the north were safe for the lower end of those totals. The upper end is going to be patchy at best, and that's just the nature of this system. It's not a focused full blanket of white for all of us. So there's a look at it for tonight, and I also put some ranges on here. Again, the lower end, especially up near Buffalo, is the more, say, easier piece to pick up. Temperatures in the 20s for all of us. We'll take a look at snow through the finish of the week coming up. Dave, Christy?
We need to stand up for safety, and we need to demand that the New York State Senate majority take these issues seriously and bring them to the Senate floor for a vote.
Assemblyman Sean Ryan says now is the time for Democrats and Republicans to come together to cut down on gun violence. At a press conference today, Ryan explained 5 bills approved by the Assembly yesterday, including measures that would extend the time for background checks and outlawing bump stocks altogether. Now, the Republican-controlled Senate approved its own set of bills to curb gun violence earlier this week. They are different from the Democrat-controlled Assembly.
The Senate's bills focus more on increasing school security and not necessarily changing current gun laws. Our Capitol correspondent Morgan Mackay is in Albany to explain what happens next with both sets of the bills.
Passage of these bills today marks yet another step in our efforts to curb gun violence. Yet it is not the end.
On Tuesday, the Assembly passed a package of 5 bills that have to do with gun control. These bills would expand background checks, ban bump stocks, and take away guns from those a court has determined to be a threat to themselves or others.
Since Congress won't act, we must show that New York once again will lead, and the numbers bear it out.
On Monday, the Senate passed their large package of 15 bills that also looks at trying to prevent gun violence in schools. These bills, however, have more to do with improving security and would place armed officers in schools. Now, lawmakers will presumably try and combine these 2 package of bills from their 2 separate houses. Except this will be no easy task, since just last week, the Senate shot down many similar gun proposals the Assembly passed. I asked Senator John DeFrancisco if he would vote for gun control bills, and he said it depends.
If it's good legislation, definitely. If it's not, I'll vote no and give my reasons why. But you got to look at each piece of legislation independently.
Governor Andrew Cuomo has only weighed in briefly on this debate, calling out the Republican-led Senate last week, saying the Republicans are offering incremental reforms to appear responsive. Democrats should define real reform in this moment. Reporting from the Capitol, I'm Morgan Mackay, News 4.
A new proposal to overhaul government sexual harassment policies in New York State is underway. The Senate's Republican majority announced the measure yesterday. It's sponsored by Senator Catherine Young. The legislation would create a new policy prohibiting harassment at all levels of state and local government. An independent task force would investigate complaints. The proposal would also ban confidential harassment settlements. The Senate could vote on the bill as early as next week.
The case against a suspended Buffalo police officer is moving forward. Joseph Hassett faces several charges for allegedly tripping a handcuffed suspect while they were in city lockup last year. Attorneys for the embattled cop today asked the judge to toss out the indictment against their client, saying they believe the grand jury process was compromised. That request was denied, and his assault charges will stand. Hassett is due back in court on March 16th.
A 15-year-old Buffalo high school student has been charged with making terroristic threats. Buffalo police say the threats were made on social media against Bennett High School yesterday. Police say they arrested the teen at a home in Buffalo using tips from the public, police, and school resource officers. Tonight, the Erie County Sheriff's Office says it has a better understanding of how their deputies view and use body cameras.
The agency rolled out body cams for about a dozen deputies back in October, and the trial and evaluation period is now over. Scott Zilka, the sheriff's spokesman, says the feedback they received from deputies was mostly positive. Deputies were asked to volunteer to wear the cameras for the past 6 months. Zilka says the next step is reviewing the data that was collected during the program and also meeting with other body camera companies. If approved by the union, the cameras would first be used by road patrols.
We find it as a great tool to collect evidence. It's not what people think it is in regards to catching a bad deputy or a bad officer. It's to collect evidence and to help ensure that we are prosecuting and sentencing bad guys.
Now, each of those body cameras cost between $500 and $600, and if the program is accepted, the department could receive additional funding from the Erie County Legislature or through state or federal grants. New York State Police are issuing a warning tonight about a possible scam involving different banks.
Scammers are using text messages to try to get your personal information. This is an example of what the scam looks like. The alerts will look like it was sent from your bank. It will ask that you contact the bank. State police say if you get a message like this, do not call the number, do not give your bank account information or your debit or credit card information. They say to call your bank or talk to somebody in person. Still to come on News 4 at 6:30, a new report is shedding lights on how utility companies receive your complaints, why some companies are now coming under fire.
And a new pediatric center opens in the Queen City. We'll tell you about the families that will benefit.
And still just watching our snow chances. Next couple of days, we'll have the latest on what you can expect, not just through tomorrow, but even through the finish of the week. Next, here, News 4 at 6:30.